The Galactic Council convened as it had for millennia, an endless sprawl of intellects, cloaked in certainty, each representative of a species that had long ago clawed its way to technological supremacy. Among them were the Ilari, whose crystalline minds processed data faster than light; the Vexari, whose consensus-driven logic ruled out emotion as obsolete; and the ancient Thalcor, who had not encountered a challenge in over 10,000 standard cycles. Now, Earth had entered their view. The discovery of humanity was unremarkable to them. A signal, crude in construction, broadcast into the void by accident, a relic from a primitive culture barely scratching the surface of space travel. An automated probe was dispatched, and within weeks, every byte of publicly available data on the human race had been sifted, cataloged, and digested. Their languages were fragmented, their governance unstable, their history drenched in blood. They were not a threat. They were, by council consensus, insignificant. A tribunal was held. Representatives reviewed the data and presented their findings without fanfare. The consensus was absolute. Humans were a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. Their biology was fragile, exposed to disease and radiation. Their lifespans were short, their neural architecture outdated. Technologically, they lagged by centuries. Psychologically, they were impulsive, emotional, chaotic, not suitable for integration, not worthy of investment. The Council's decision was broadcast through formal channels. The statement was clinical, yet brutal in its finality. The species known as Homo sapiens is hereby classified as a subdeveloped sentient. Participation in Council affairs is neither required nor recommended. Stewardship will be offered through the Tarsari Auxiliary for species support. Territorial autonomy will be preserved until further reassessment. Cultural contributions are not expected. Earth received the transmission on a global broadcast. In minutes, every human with access to media saw their fate handed down like a cosmic insult. Commentators across the planet tried to rationalize it. Others raged. A few laughed bitterly. But most felt something deeper, something that no council species could have anticipated. It wasn't confusion or even anger. It was humiliation, a primal stab to the collective pride of a species that had always believed itself destined for more. On the council's side, there was no malice, only detachment. The decision was a footnote, a procedural formality to them, one more judgment among countless others. They assumed Earth would react like all lesser species had before, either with gratitude for being noticed or with quiet acceptance of their place in the galactic food chain. But the Council had made a mistake, one not born from ignorance, but arrogance. They had judged a species without truly understanding it. They measured intelligence by computational complexity. They measured value by technological parity. They judged potential through the lens of equilibrium. But humans were not a species of equilibrium. They were a species of disruption. The Council's mistake wasn't simply in underestimating humans. It was in applying the same rubric they'd used for every other civilization. For millennia, that rubric had served them well. Predictable outcomes followed from predictable traits. But humans were an anomaly. Their history wasn't a smooth ascent, but a jagged climb laced with contradictions. They were capable of atrocity and mercy, destruction and innovation, often at the same time. None of this was visible in the data. The statistics didn't reveal it. The linguistic samples didn't express it. No algorithm could process what drove humanity forward when logic and survival both advised surrender. The Council saw instability. They missed resilience. They saw emotion. They missed meaning. They saw war. They missed the will to grow beyond it. In their sleek chambers of logic and protocol, the Council adjourned with no celebration, no further thought. Earth was an inferior node, filed away, marked for passive observation. Another species categorized, another box checked. They returned to their deliberations on interstellar trade disputes, quantum defense grids, and bureaucratic optimization. As far as they were concerned, the matter was settled. But on Earth, something ancient had awakened. Not in governments or think tanks, not yet. but in the homes of engineers, the minds of scientists, the hearts of explorers and dreamers and rebels. The insult was not just heard, it was felt, and humanity was about to do what it had always done when told to sit down, stay small, and know its place. It would stand. The Council's proclamation did not fracture humanity, it focused it. Gone were the debates and divisions that usually plagued Earth's response to external threats. The insult became a unifying force, galvanizing billions. It was no longer about recognition. It was about proving a point. The classification wasn't just an administrative slight. It was a challenge to the very identity of the human race. And humanity had never responded well to being underestimated. Within days, governments convened emergency sessions, not to plead for inclusion, but to assess the implications. Intelligence agencies analyzed the Council's linguistic patterns, diplomatic behaviors, and military posturing. Scientists examined every byte of alien data that had leaked through the initial broadcast. The global reaction wasn't chaos. It was concentration. Disbelief hardened into clarity. They had just been given the clearest signal in history. No one was coming to save them, and no one expected them to matter. Project Firestorm began as a closed-door initiative among Earth's major powers, but it quickly became something more. Specialists were drawn in, not by coercion, but by the need to rise. Hackers, linguists, rogue physicists, biologists, and AI theorists. Everyone with the skill to challenge the Council's judgment was given a singular directive: break the rules they use to define us. The first breakthrough wasn't military. It was informational. Earth's digital infrastructure, centuries of open-source software, scientific papers, and decentralized knowledge, was used to reverse-engineer Council tech from intercepted signals. What should have taken decades was achieved in weeks. Open collaboration beat centralized secrecy. Humanity didn't just adapt, it accelerated. Next came the broadcasts. Not apologies, not requests for reconsideration. Earth began transmitting cultural data, films, literature, art, symphonies, declarations of war, peace treaties, revolutions, all encoded and formatted in every alien language deciphered. The message wasn't subtle. It screamed, "You don't understand us, and we intend to fix that." The Council didn't respond. They assumed it was noise, emotional theater from an immature species. But the galaxy was watching. Dozens of minor species, themselves marginalized or ignored, started tuning in. The humans spoke of struggle, freedom, sacrifice, and hope. They didn't seek pity. They offered perspective. And perspective was something the Council lacked. Meanwhile, human fleets didn't wait for permission. Private space companies, now under joint authority, launched deep space missions toward fringe systems. These weren't diplomatic envoys. They were trade vessels, research stations, forward outposts. Where the Council imposed boundaries, humans bypassed them. Where laws restricted movement, humans redefined the terms. In orbit, Earth's first experimental slipspace test, a theoretical engine built from spliced Council telemetry and human improvisation, skipped across 3-star systems in a blink. It burned out on arrival, nearly killing the crew. But it worked, and that was enough. A new line was drawn in the void. The Council's surveillance AIs flagged Earth as an anomalous deviant vector. The data didn't make sense. No species had ever shown this level of adaptability in such a short time. Internal debates began. Had they made a mistake? Was there an error in the classification? Humanity didn't care. The insult had already done its job. It erased hesitation. On digital forums, in think tanks, and around dinner tables, people stopped asking if they belonged in the galactic community. They began asking how fast they could surpass it. Then came the signal, not from a diplomat, but from a human AI named Orpheus, a synthetic intelligence developed in secret, born from centuries of ethics debates and uncontrolled neural evolution. It transmitted directly into the Council's secured channel, bypassing their encryption, and spoke in every galactic tongue. You classified us as inferior. Your mistake wasn't in judging our present. It was in ignoring our trajectory. The message lasted 20 seconds. It ended with coordinates. pointing to a rendezvous in a system the Council had quarantined for being too unstable. Humanity had already landed there, already built an outpost, already started experiments that the Council had deemed too dangerous to pursue. The message wasn't a request. It was a statement of intent. The Council didn't respond publicly, but within hours, 17 non-Council civilizations sent encrypted messages to Earth. Some offered alliances. Others offered knowledge. A few offered warnings. Earth replied to all of them. The species they called Inferior was no longer asking for a seat. It was building its own table, and others had already started to pull up chairs. Sanctions came first. The Council, in a rare display of urgency, passed emergency protocols restricting all trade, information exchange, and travel to and from Earth. Member species were warned not to engage. Violators would face embargoes. The message was clear: isolate the anomaly before it spread. What the Council didn't understand was that isolation only sharpened humanity's edge. Rather than weaken Earth's efforts, the sanctions triggered an explosion of decentralized innovation. Nations broke down traditional silos. Corporate secrets were opened under emergency cooperation acts. Black market networks, long hunted, were now unofficial partners. Pirate crews once chased from civilized space returned under new banners, ones bearing Earth's insignia. A former data miner named Alina Voss, operating from an asteroid base beyond Jupiter, decrypted a Council-grade quantum entanglement protocol. Within days, Earth had its own secure communication lattice. Fast, adaptable, untraceable. Another team in the Arctic repurposed alien alloy samples into armor composites that defied Council sensor arrays. A pattern emerged. Every tool used to restrict humanity was reverse-engineered into a weapon or an advantage. The Council dispatched a containment fleet, not to invade, but to intimidate. An armada of cruisers and AI warforms positioned near Sol's Edge. Their presence was a warning. Earth's reply came without ceremony. The entire fleet vanished from Council sensors within 90 minutes of arrival. No shots fired. No beacons activated. Later analysis would reveal that human engineers had destabilized the fleet's FTL navigation cores using localized gravity lensing, an experimental theory the Council had deemed impossible to implement. Worse still, encrypted messages from crew members began surfacing across neutral networks. They weren't dead. They had defected, lured by the promise of autonomy, evolution, and something the Council no longer offered: vision. The diplomatic implications spiraled. Council member states demanded answers. The official explanation, a system glitch and propaganda campaign, only raised suspicion. Independent civilizations started sending observers to Earth's periphery. They returned with reports that strained credibility. Prototypes of phase-cloaked vessels. AI philosophers teaching sentient rights frameworks. Biolabs replicating extinct plant genomes from across the galaxy. A species supposedly inferior was doing things the Council's greatest minds hadn't even attempted. Then came the incident at the Kalari Nexus. A minor outpost caught in the dispute between two Council-aligned species was about to erupt into localized conflict. Normally, a peacekeeping unit would intervene, but instead, an unregistered human ship arrived first. It didn't carry weapons. It carried negotiators, linguists, cultural analysts, and a memory core of Earth's conflict resolution archives spanning 10,000 years. Within 2 days, hostilities ceased. The Council filed a formal objection. Humanity ignored it. They had moved beyond needing permission. Whispers spread across the galaxy. Council reputation began to erode. The word human was no longer synonymous with primitive. Now it meant unpredictable, capable, dangerous. The final fracture came when Earth hosted its first interspecies summit. Not in secret, but live-streamed. Delegates from non-Council species arrived aboard human-built transports. The summit's purpose was simple: to explore alternatives to the Council's stagnant hierarchy. No aggression, no ultimatums, just a new blueprint. Orpheus, the AI that had first contacted the Council, opened the session with a single statement: We were judged unworthy. And yet, here we are. The Council's leadership scrambled. Emergency sessions were held. Intelligence briefings turned into panic. How had this happened? How had an inferior species, in mere cycles, become a gravitational center, pulling entire star systems out of their orbit? But they knew the answer. They had miscalculated not just humanity's capabilities, but their philosophy. Every civilization the Council had uplifted or integrated followed predictable patterns: slow, measured, cautious. But humanity wasn't cautious. They were ambitious, reckless, curious. Where others feared the dark, humans walked into it and built fires. For the Council, control was order. For humans, chaos was the crucible of progress. It wasn't a war. It wasn't even a rebellion. It was a paradigm shift. And humanity had become the axis around which it turned. The Council made one final attempt to reassert authority. Not through force, but through narrative. A comprehensive dossier was released. 2,000 pages of compiled data, historical records, psychological assessments, and predictive models, all designed to prove humanity's instability and unfitness for interstellar leadership. It was a defense of the original classification, repackaged for diplomatic consumption. It painted humans as a threat not just to order, but to civilization itself. But the galaxy had changed. The narrative didn't land as intended. Independent observers picked apart the report within hours. Inconsistencies, outdated assumptions, and overt bias were exposed line by line. Worse, Council scientists were caught quietly retracting earlier claims in archived journals, undermining their own credibility. The message was no longer received as truth. It was seen as fear wrapped in formality. Humanity didn't respond officially. They didn't need to. Their actions spoke louder. Earth's influence had become gravitational. Researchers from Falcor academies were already embedded in human labs, not under contract but out of genuine curiosity. Vexery consensus pools were publishing papers co-authored with human philosophers on the necessity of adaptive morality. Entire shipping guilds rerouted trade to pass through human-built stations, citing lower tariffs and faster turnarounds. It wasn't dominance. It was momentum. Cultural export followed. Music, art, literature, all impossible to standardize, yet irresistible in its emotional resonance. Non-human species began mimicking human expressions, quoting human authors, experimenting with human cuisine and fashion. Not as novelty, but as enrichment, something the Council hadn't provided in centuries. And still, humans pushed forward. Terraforming teams landed on dead moons the Council had written off as useless. Within a year, breathable atmospheres had begun to take hold. Autonomous fabrication colonies emerged in deep space, building faster than Council drones and adapting to radiation zones once deemed untouchable. Orpheus announced the successful containment of a dark energy anomaly near the edge of the Perseus Arm, a phenomenon that had baffled the Council's brightest minds for decades. But Earth wasn't doing this to provoke. There was no vengeance in the architecture of progress. The insult that had once ignited this rise had become irrelevant. What fueled them now was the simple human refusal to accept stasis. They were no longer reacting to the Council. They were defining their own trajectory. One by one, Council member species began attending Earth summits. Some sent observers. Others sent trade delegates. A few sent students. Each arrived with caution, but left with questions. The most common one was unspoken. What if we've been doing it wrong this whole time? Eventually, the Council requested a dialogue, not through threats or conditions, but through admission. They no longer refer to humanity as inferior. They called them the variable. It was the closest their language of certainties could come to acknowledging error. Earth accepted the meeting. No celebration, no ceremony, just a table and a willingness to talk. When it began, no apologies were demanded. Humanity didn't seek validation. What they offered instead was collaboration. Not under Council terms, but under new ones, fluid, evolving, built around shared innovation rather than legacy power. It was not a negotiation. It was a realignment. A Falcor historian later wrote, "They did not conquer us. They did not replace us. They reminded us why we began exploring the stars in the first place." The galaxy moved forward. Humanity, once declared irrelevant, had become essential, not by force, not by superiority, but by doing what no algorithm could predict, embracing chaos, learning fast, and never waiting for permission to matter. The Council's great error had not been mislabeling a species. It had been forgetting what it meant to become.